now listening to The Soul Connection on Blog Talk Radio. It's spirituality simplified, conversations on conscious living, featuring your hosts, Bettina Goodwin and Eric Cerrone.
Well, hello everybody. Hello Bettina. How are you?
Hi everyone. Hi Eric. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. How was your week this week?
Busy. I have that big concert coming up tomorrow. I've been singing with a group of women from our choir and friends of women from our choir at senior citizens' homes. So I've been doing that 2 nights a week since last week, and I haven't got my Christmas decorations out or my chocolates made. So I've been doing everything this week, which is interesting.
Now, with this concert that you're doing tomorrow, I know you've been putting a lot of work into it and a lot of practice. Is it over after tomorrow? Like, do you have any more live performances or big performances?
No, it's one big performance tomorrow. And we practiced last week with the soloist. It was the first practice with the first and only practice with the soloist. So it was really fun, and she was very impressed. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I was really relaxed until middle of our little gig that we were doing at a seniors residence last night. And I thought, gee, I really feel comfortable standing in the front row here, singing for all these people. And this should be really good for Saturday's performance. And then it hit me. So I've been a little bit anxious about it. So I'm just trying to, I've been busy, so that helps as well. But just trying to be with it and recognize that it's really an illusion. But yeah, it's sort of the culmination of weeks and weeks of work, so it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I love that excitement, and I think it's so important for each of us to have it, like in our own lives, whether it be, through singing or performances or speaking, or for me, I feel that way still with competitive sports, and I love that feeling of knowing that there's a big game or a big event, and ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, nothing really matters, but something that you put a lot of value on, and you put a lot of meaning towards. And in the time leading up to it, and then at the moments before, the butterfly feeling in your stomach, and you just feel so alive and so ready to, be at your best. And I feel like it's something so special in life, because we can live the majority of our life not knowing that we're trying our absolute best. We tend sometimes to coast and stay in our comfort zones and stay where things are easy. And then when the lights are on us and we know that we're there to entertain or to compete or to show up and perform, it's a nice reminder as to what like a peak experience can be. And it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling of being alive and being ready to put your best foot forward.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things I found about the fear and the anxiety about performing or, being worried about doing your best is that fear and anxiety actually guides you to that place of, really being present, because you don't want to feel that anxiety in the moment of that performance. So it really pushes you to be more present with the experience and breathe properly and really, because you don't want to miss that moment because you're so, worried about making a mistake. And that worry about making a mistake is going to really put you in a place where you are going to make a mistake because it takes you out of presence. And so that fear is just the reminder to be as present as you possibly can, to breathe into the moment and to really experience it fully. So in a way, I'm sort of grateful for it, but in a way it's like, no, not now.
Yeah, those last few days where it hits you, you're like, oh my God, it's gonna happen. And then and
Yeah.
it's a great thing though, because sometimes we talk so much on the show about the fear, and you always you introduced me to this concept, like, I don't know, gosh, 5, 6 years ago, about how fear is always the worst, or it feels the worst, just on the threshold of going over and then doing the thing. Um, and sometimes we can feel that way about a confrontation we know we have to have, or a situation where we have to leave something that we were previously committed to, or we all felt that stress and anxiety about a conversation that we had to have, but we were like kind of putting off because we didn't want to deal with it. Um, and we talk a lot about that on this show, but it's really nice to have an incident where it's something that's really fun and pleasurable, and it's going to give a lot of joy not only to yourself to perform, but also to the people you're performing for. It's going to be something that's, like you said, a culmination of weeks of effort, and it's totally voluntary because it's something that you love to do. And having the fear still arise uh, before something that's going to be super fun and super rewarding, uh, and it's going to be a great feeling of accomplishment and pride in it. It's a lot easier to maybe sometimes see in these situations the machinery of some of our anxieties, stress, and fear. And then once we go out on stage, and I don't know if this is true for you, but I know that when I feel those butterflies, it's it's a crazy, intense feeling of being alive. And then for me, when I go to perform, when I go do a public some speaking, or when I go and play sports at a high level, I know that once I get into it, I calm. I don't necessarily calm down, but I just kind of get into the moment, like you said, about being present and really feeling the situation and being really alert and sensitive to all that's going on around me, so that I can perform my best. And that's really something fun for me to think about when I'm pitching in baseball, or I'm giving a talk. But it's the same thing as if I had something that I was dreading, whether it was changing a situation at work, or leaving a relationship, or asking for what we want, in anything in life. And to notice it's the same process, but in this one, sometimes it's easier to look at because it's something that's pleasurable rather than something that we're really scared is going to be unpleasurable.
Yeah, I think really the fear is about not being able to cope. Like the idea that when I have to have this conversation with this person, I'm not going to be able to cope with the outcome. And I think the whole idea of, I talk about this all the time, but the whole idea of letting go of the outcome and realizing that you have always been able to cope with whatever has come up in your life. You've always been able to cope with it, whether well or badly, it doesn't matter. You have coped with it and you've survived it. Knowing that and reinforcing that and understanding that whatever that experience that you're having is still just an experience, and you're the one who can, through your own perspective, either see it as a good experience or see it as something frightening or scary or bad. And so just recognizing the idea that I can cope with anything that comes up. Yes, it might be scary. Yes, I might feel sad or angry or hurt or embarrassed. But again, they're just emotions. It's like we don't worry about, oh, I might feel loved, right? Because love, oh, love is wonderful and everybody is looking for love. But an emotion is an emotion. And I think it's us that put the perspective of positive and negative emotions, whereas just allowing it to flow through us, we recognize that it is really just another experience that we're having in this human existence. And that changes it. And then the other thing is, just speaking to the idea of either performing or speaking in front of large crowds of people, which is always been one of my fears. Yes, I'll be singing with a choir, but even when you're singing with a choir, if you go wrong, oh, it's going to be heard. by somebody. But the times when I sing the best are when I'm all by myself and no one is listening and I'm just giving it all I've got. And and it's interesting because when we were doing the filming for that film that's coming out next year, in between takes of the actual filming, the musicians were there and they were all jamming. And I mean, you get a bunch of musicians in a room, they're not going to sit still. They're going to be playing and filling every moment with this amazing music, whatever it is. And so the choir would just start, they'd start jamming, we'd start singing. It was relaxed. It was just a really, really cool vibe that was happening. And those are the moments that you want to capture. And those are that's the kind of feeling that you want to have, just recognizing that there's no difference between standing in your living room or your shower, singing or talking or saying whatever it is you want to say, and doing it in front of 50 people, 100 people, 200 people, however many it is. There's no difference. You're doing the same thing. There's just, there's different witnesses to what you're doing, but there's really no difference at the core in what you're actually doing in that moment. And I think it's a really hard thing to come to terms with, because for some reason, speaking in front of a crowd or singing in front of a crowd or performing in any way, shape, or form has been ingrained in us as a society to be something very daunting. And you have to have a lot of courage to do it. And I think we have more courage within us than we recognize. We just think it's going to be some grand gesture, that courage. And it's not. It's living your day to day and coping with, all the experiences with you have in the best way possible. That's really courage to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. There's so many places to go with what you said. Last night, I know that you love this TED Talk, but the Brené Brown talk on vulnerability, watched it again last night as just part of my viewing. And, she says very much, about the courage of, the difference between courage and bravery. And courage is really, the difference is to show up wholehearted and be that vulnerable. And like being on stage, we are vulnerable. Having that conversation, we are vulnerable. We're asking for what we want, or we're stating what we will no longer accept. And that vulnerability is terrifying, because like you said, if the reaction, we're scared of the reaction not being what it is that we want. We're scared of the outcome not being what we want, and then we feel like we're going to lose something. And we're so scared of it, but when you look right at it, it's that vulnerability that when you talked about the opportunity, who knows, at the end of it, you might come out of it with an incredible amount of love, a love for the people who are performing with you, the love and adoration of an audience, or the one you're speaking to. When we're most vulnerable and speak most genuinely about what it is that we want, and we should really show up from a space of that loving presence, and just there to really talk about how we want to give more, how we want to live more fully, live in more love. Those are the times when another person and ourselves is most lovable. We're most worthy of love, and it's a place where we're the most attractive. It's very easy to understand why rock stars are so attractive, or actors and actresses. When somebody is up there, or even if you think about somebody that you love, or somebody that you have loved, when they're in their zone, when they're doing the thing that they love to do, whether it's you singing, or me playing a sport, or doing a talk, or when you see somebody who's amazing with their hands, and a carpenter like my dad, when he's in his zone and for an afternoon toils around in his workshop, and at the end of it comes out with like a beautiful working piece of engineering, or an artist who will spend 3 hours in their room and come up with a beautiful watercolor. as a gift. Like it's so attractive to watch somebody in their element, doing what it is that they do. Um, and sometimes we try to be so guarded and not put ourselves out there for rejection, and we end up numbing all the experiences. You know, like Brené Brown says, when we seek to not feel those anxieties, not feel those fears, when we're on the threshold of fear and we just don't want to deal with it, we don't want to have the talk, we just keep pushing it away, we don't want to change our circumstance, and we go for distraction, whether all the ways that you can distract yourself, you know, you don't get to selectively numb. You don't get just to say, I don't want to feel the bad things. When we distract ourselves, when we don't fully show up, when we're not fully vulnerable, we don't just numb the bad things. We numb the good things too. We numb the joy. We numb the connection. We numb the love. We numb the feeling, the energy between ourselves and the principle. And it's something to remember, and why I love so much to hear about, you being on the precipice of this big performance of yours, because it's just such a great thing about life. Because when you're done, you're just gonna be so full of energy. It's gonna be the end of it. You're gonna be chit chatting with all the people in the choir around you. For guys in sports, it's the high five, or girls too. But it's it's with all the guys, high fives, hugs, and all this stuff after you do it. It's such a release of positive energy, and it's such an awesome experience of connection, and you realize, like, in the human life, it's all we're here for, and it just feels so fantastic. And so, yeah, we should fill our lives with as much of this stuff as possible, not only on the fun side, but also speaking up and being vulnerable and being open to whatever outcome happens. And it's why I love, performing and sports. And, for me, it's really personal because I love to coach, and I love to coach kids. And you go out there, and there's usually two teams, and half the time you win and half the time you lose. Half the time you get the outcome you want, and half the time you don't. And it's that practice of sometimes succeeding and sometimes failing, in dealing with both. And sometimes you succeed even though you didn't perform amazingly. And sometimes you fail even though you were perfect, but a teammate or another member of your team didn't do something well and caused you to have the outcome you didn't want. And that's no different than, having a difficult conversation in relationship, or choosing something new in your life. Sometimes it'll work out, and sometimes it won't. And sometimes, there will be some correlation as to how you perform and the outcome, but not always. And it's that ability to release and see the process as the valuable process that it is, and really satisfying the point of living a life well lived, is to go through these human experiences. There's really no other reason I can think of that we're here.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's really interesting that you say, uh, specifically you were talking about in the area of sports, and that you don't always win. Sometimes you lose, and you have to deal with that disappointment of losing. And I find it really interesting that. Well, I don't have little kids anymore, so I don't know a lot about how it works, but I've heard a lot of things about, well, we don't, everybody gets a trophy at the end of the year, and we don't count the points, and we don't, score. I find it really interesting because I feel like it's that whole trend towards avoiding those negative feelings, and I get the idea that it's supposed to be about building confidence, but I think it's also putting us in that place of distraction and denial and avoidance. And I think you can't avoid disappointment, you can't avoid hurt, you can't avoid anger, you can't avoid fear. It's a part of the human experience, and because you can't avoid it, you might as well learn how to deal with it and have the experiences of disappointment and have the experiences of anger and fear and guilt and whatever it is, because the more experiences that you have, the better off you are in learning how to deal with them, how to get beyond them, and how to return to that loving presence after each experience that you have.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really well said, and that could be a series of shows. This rush towards, everybody getting a participation trophy, or we're not going to keep score. We're just out there for the fun, and there is some value in that. I'm not going to strip it all of its value and be a hardliner saying, you gotta win, you gotta lose, and in life, life's tough and there's competition and so on. Because that's not the angle I want to take on it. But I think that there is a lot of detriment being done in this push towards homogeny, and it's not only in childhood athletics, which I see a lot of, and there's a lot of discussion about it when I'm involved in some executive um, groups with Little League and so on. And these conversations come up a lot, and sometimes you get loud parents or loud activists on either side of the aisle, and you have to really boil it down to what's really important. That whether it's singing or whether it's baseball or whatever, the, baseball doesn't matter in life. It's just baseball is a vehicle through which you teach life. And I feel like that's always my anchoring when it comes to making a decision or enacting a policy when it comes to these things. And I think not only in athletics, but in everything, even in gender relations, there's such a strive towards equality. And while equality is a great ideal, homogeny is not a great ideal. We need to celebrate each of that thing in us that makes us special. And like you said, going through wins and losses, being the best singer in a choir and being the worst singer in a choir, there's lessons to be learned in both. And we can experience that experience one off of each other. I mean, there's always a level up we can go to in any pursuit in life, whether it's on YouTube doing podcasts. We can have the best podcast in the GTA, but you open up to Ontario, and now we're in the bottom half, and then we got to work. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful, humbling experience to be the best at something, and lift others up, and lead, show how it's done. Whether it's working, on here or with children, or whether you're teaching a class. And there's also tremendous things to be learned to try something new, something that you are, the student, a raw student. You have tons to learn. You have a huge learning curve ahead of you, and you look up to the people. It's so funny because it's just the way human interactions work. Your yoga teacher, as you begin yoga, you're the teacher, they're the student, could be your employee, your entry-level employee in your business, where you're the boss and they're the low-level employee. And it's amazing that we each have these passions and strengths in our lives to teach one another. And it doesn't really matter who's the best at yoga, or who's the best at business, or who's the best at baseball, or who's the best at singing or playing piano. It doesn't matter. What matters is the interactions that we have in relation to one another, and how we can do both with humility and grace, be the leader and be the newbie.
Yeah, that's just so well said. I mean, I can't even really add to anything to that, because I just feel like you hit the nail on the head. It's not about the experience you have; it's how you move through it. That's really, the most important thing, and that's just what you learn through life, through living, and being human, and being this wonderful, beautiful divine light that's stuck in this heavy, solid mass of skin and bones and carbon and oxygen and all these wonderful things. It's a really interesting experience when you look at it from that perspective, and realize how difficult a journey it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and to give ourselves a little bit of a break, to realize that there's more things to get good at than there's time to get good at them. And we're not going to be amazing at everything. And to give away that control, and to give ourselves that real big dose of self-compassion when we need to get better at something. And then once we can do that with ourselves, then we can extend it to all the others. We can until we have it in ourselves, we can't see it in somebody else. And then being able to give that compassion to somebody else who's struggling, if they do something that could well be judged as being rude, mean, hateful. when we realize the ways that we do it, it may look differently, but we still do it. And we might have different ways in which we do it and different subjects in which we do it, but it's all one big human experience, and there's nothing that I can feel that you can't, and there's nothing that you can do that I can't. It might just look a lot different. And if we can get to that place, I think we can have a lot more love, connection, and peace in our lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Bettina, I know we've burned up our half hour already. And,
wow.
If you would finish this and send us off into our week with a meditation, I think that'd be really terrific.
I would love to. Let's close our eyes and take a deep breath and breathe deeply into this experience that we call life. This human journey that we take, that's full of mistakes and missteps, of hurt and disappointment, but also love and peace and joy, and every one of those emotions that we experience can be welcomed and accepted and allowed to have its space and to move through us, because the human experience is about understanding ourselves, about living with all these emotions and being able to feel peace no matter what we're feeling emotionally, to be at peace with anxiety, to be at peace with anger. It's not to be projected at others. It's not to be used as a weapon, but to allow ourselves to let it flow through us, just as love flows through us, just as joy flows through us, gratitude and happiness. But anger and fear and guilt can flow through us as well, and just as easily. And it allows more space for the flow of love and peace and joy. Breathe into this and understand that the only thing that is causing your suffering when you feel fear is your resistance to allowing it to move through you. You're holding on to the idea that you must get rid of it. Breathe into this. Feel the peace in knowing that vulnerability is a strength and not a weakness. That being strong in your emotional body sometimes means being vulnerable. Letting yourself fall apart before you can build yourself back together again. And take this into your daily life, one step at a time. And then when you're ready, wiggle your fingers and your toes and bring yourself back to the world.
Thank you, Bettina.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week and joining us here. This is our second live video that we've done. And make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We'll put out a show every week. And leave a comment. And that's what I'm really excited about this, Bettina, is that, it's a much better forum. Our podcast didn't really have a place to comment once a video gets watched. And sometimes it's nice to see the comments below, especially with the kind of viewership and the kind of energy that this show would, creates in the viewer. To have some positive, uplifting place or forum below the video for people to share or ask questions. So
yeah, it'll be great. It'll be great to have that interaction with people and really make it more three-dimensional.
Yeah, I really look forward to it. Well, have a great week, everybody.
Have a great week. See you next week.
Thank you for joining us today on The Soul Connection. Eric Cerrone is a spiritual thinker, listener, and coach. To find out more about Eric, you can go to intelligentoasis.com. Bettina Goodwin is the creator of The Wise Man's Way. The Wise Man's Way, heart-centered living for the modern urban man. For information on products and services, including workshops, group meetings, and one-on-one counseling, please go to thewisemansway.ca. And for more information on living an authentic life, to learn more about Bettina's offerings as a spiritual counselor and Reiki master, please visit thesoulconnection.ca. Thank you for tuning in to The Soul Connection.